tell me you're different. You say you got some things and you're working on it. Oh, but I never listen. No, was too busy thinking you're the perfect one. It's such a mystery, cause usually I'm looking for a reason to stay. But who would have believed that here I be and I just can't look away. Oh, you tried to give me a warning, say watch your step before you fall too hard. You tell me I'm crazy, I say not crazy enough, but I'm crazy for you, crazy, crazy about us. And I know that it's true, baby, it may be too much, but I'm crazy for you, crazy, crazy in love. Can't even thinking you're alone and how you feel. I wanna show you the difference. If you let me, I could show you something real. It's such a mystery, cause usually I'm looking for a reason to stay. Oh, yeah. But who would have believed that here I be and I just can't look away. Oh, you tried to give me a warning, say watch your step before you fall too hard. You tell me I'm crazy, I say not crazy enough, but I'm crazy for you, crazy, crazy about us. And I know that it's true, baby, it may be too much, but I'm crazy for you, crazy, crazy in love. You try to give me a warning, say watch your step before you fall too hard. You tell me I'm crazy, I say not crazy enough, but I'm crazy for you, crazy, crazy about us. And I know that it's true, baby, it may be too much, but I'm crazy for you, crazy, crazy in love. Never giving up, never giving up, never giving up, never giving up on you. Never giving up, never giving up, never giving up, never giving up on you. Never giving up, never giving up, never giving up, never giving up on you. Never giving up, never giving up, never giving up, never giving up on you.
Ten, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
All right, everyone, how are you doing? This is your host, Michael Voss, the Dragon of the Southern Tier, here with you at the No Soundbites Allowed podcast on the Exceptional Conservative Network. I hope everyone is doing well. I'm happy to be here with you. We're going to have a great show today. And there's just so much that's going on in the news. There's just so much that's happening right now. And I literally I was just on the phone following up some news and some events right up until literally 1 minute before the show started. So I'm still collecting my thoughts on all of that. And I want to try and make sure that I give you as much information as possible about what's happening, what's going on. There's a lot of things in the local community. There's obviously big news on the national level. I want to try and get all of that. We're working on several programs for Saturday, several very interesting leaders talking to us about aspects, things that are happening in Utica, things that are happening in Binghamton, and some of the things that are going to be happening in the nation. So I want to try and cover all of that. But first, let's start off with something very important. On Tuesday, a lot of people may not be aware of this. It's not been big national news. But one of the big things that's been going on is in Colorado on Tuesday, there was a school shooting. A lot of people may not be aware of that. I'm surprised because there hasn't been a lot of news on this. And we know how the news media loves to emphasize school shootings. That is, school shootings when they believe they can blame that on either the gun owners, President Trump, anything that they believe will advocate or push forward the anti-Second Amendment beliefs that the media has that matches many of the progressive ideals. And so you hear a lot about certain stories, but if you hear anything about a story where a good guy with a gun comes in and stops the event or prevents it, which is usually how these things end, then you don't hear anything. The story disappears. Well, kind of in that same vein, very much like the other most recent shooting, where we had a young man, Kyle, jump in, confront the school shooter, and was killed in that process. We had the same thing happen with a young man, Kendrick Castillo, an 18-year-old who was a member of the STEM school in Colorado. And I want to get the location right because it's I hate when I get it wrong. And I had it here in front of me. And I apologize because I'm looking at it in the news and I just don't remember the name of it, of the school. But Mr. Castillo, a student, when we say STEM, that means science, technology, engineering, and math. It's a school focused on that. Mr. Castillo was a hunting advocate. He was a fisherman. He liked his technology. And he confronted the shooter, and that allowed many of the other students to survive. He was a hero. While 8 other students were injured, the incident with 2 shooters involved ended in part because of his actions. And you haven't heard a lot of that in the news. And you may say to yourself, well, Mike, why is that? Why didn't we hear about this? This is a story we need to hear about. A hero, a child, a young man who gave everything to protect his friends, to protect his family, to go out there and do the right thing, and enabled so many lives to be saved. And this is something that needs to be spoken about. And the answer to that is, well, 2 parts. One, we know that the individuals involved, one of them is apparently a transgender student. Another one is also is an anti-Trump advocate. He's a very far left advocate. And this is from the early reports and early news reports that we've been seeing. This is the indication that both of these 2 shooters don't fit any part of the political message that is normally put out there against anyone with a firearm. And so the media doesn't want to talk about it. And they really should, because it doesn't matter whether the individual is trans or a Republican or a progressive. It doesn't matter about that. What does matter, something that I've said often and I will say again, what does matter is, why did anyone get to the point in their life where the only answer is, I need to go and kill innocent people? That is a problem. That is the problem. If we can answer that problem, we can resolve the issue of school shootings. Without addressing that, we go nowhere. And the media not talking about a school shooting where a hero has given their life to save others and not addressing the core question, what made these individuals decide the only answer in their life was to kill others, then you're doing a disservice. You're not trying to find an answer to the problem. You're not trying to fix the problem. You're just politicking. And I have to say, I want to give great credit because the students, in response to the media doing that, their answer, and you can see this in the USA Today newspaper online, was published on today, the 9th, May 9th, and that was at 12:24 this afternoon. They came out with the article, Students Walk Out of Colorado School Shooting Vigil, saying their trauma was being politicized. And I'm not trying to politicize it. And they're right. It is being politicized. And I do have that article up right now. You can read about it. And one of the things I think that's very important that was said in that article, and I want to find it here. There it is. One of the students on social media, and I'm quoting the article here, the students drew plenty of support on social media. Quote, these politicians remind me of ambulance chasers, posted a Utah woman, ready to pounce on the next big shooting with their gun control agenda. A Colorado woman posted, quote, love this so much. I'm so proud of these students. After some rough political months here in Colorado, this was a welcomed sight and hope for our future. Now, just to be clear, so what happened? Well, there was a vigil which was organized by the Brady campaign. Okay, and if you don't remember the Brady campaign, this is the Brady campaign to prevent gun violence. It was created after the attack against the attempted assassination of Ronald Reagan. Brady was injured, had brain damage, and he created a gun violence organization, which is against firearms. And this organization, which is very hyper-partisan and very much against the Second Amendment, held a vigil inviting all the press to this to celebrate the life of Mr. Castillo and to emphasize the anti-gun rhetoric. And the students, several hundred students, as has been reported by many parts of the news media, balked at this. They were very upset about this. They walked out. In fact, there is another article I'll bring up, the Denver Post, in their article, which was done, and that was published May 8th, last night at 8:31. May 8th at 8:31, they published the article, STEM School Students Burst into Spontaneous Protest During Vigil at Highlands Ranch High School. That's it. It's the Highlands Ranch High School, where more than 1,000 people were packed in the St. Andrew's United Methodist Church. And during that event, several hundred students left. They walked out of the event, and they were all chanting the words mental health. Okay? They were attacking the news media. And I agree with them, because the mainstream media does not talk about the core issue. What is making these individuals, these deranged individuals, going out with the thought that the only thing that can answer their problems in life is to go and kill innocent people? We need to address that. I don't care what kind of legislation, I don't care where you stand on the Second Amendment. If you want to end school shootings, if you want to prevent them from happening in the future, any kind of shooting, you have to address the question, where is it coming from? What is making people say that the only answer is to kill innocent people? I don't understand the leap in logic that brings a person to that point where that is the only answer that they have in life. That is the only thing they can say in life is, I need to kill someone. If we can't answer that, we can't answer any of this. I don't care how many laws you put out there. We have over 22,000 gun laws. And and these laws are obviously not addressing the question that brings these shooters out, because they think the only answer is to kill innocent people, which is wrong, which is absolutely wrong And there's your problem. Don't attack legal gun owners. Don't attack law-abiding citizens. Let's attack that question. There was an article by 538.com, which is generally left-leaning, but they did a really comprehensive review. And in their review, they were looking at what are the causes of mass shootings and can we resolve it? They found that there are about 38 different, and I'm not quoting the article here, but I believe it was about 38 different scenarios that have led to mass shootings. And I know I did an article on that, and I got to find it. But that's the thing. There is several issues. Some of them are because of mental health. Some of them are just because of evil people. Some of them are because of political agendas. There's a lot of reasons, money, a lot of reasons why mass shootings do happen, but we're not addressing any of those. Just by saying that there's a red flag law does not stop someone from going out and doing this. We've seen this in Islamberg. We've seen this in Long Island, in Suffolk County, where people are making bombs. Kids are making bombs. Okay? Just saying that you can't get this firearm. We've seen it in New York City. We've seen it in Las Vegas, where people are using cars to run over people as a weapon. We've seen it with the World Trade Center, where people use box cutters, and that was religiously based. I just gave you 4 examples of where taking away or a couple of examples where taking away the firearms does not make anyone safer. It doesn't resolve the underlying problem. And in each of those cases, I just gave you examples that were completely different. And they have how these individuals came to that same conclusion is completely different. And that's the problem. And that's aggravating. Our news media needs to stop being political here and address the root cause. Let's deal with that. If we want to protect our kids, we have to answer this question. And if we don't answer this question, we're not doing our jobs. Now, as a segue, I also want to mention, or related to that, we should also address the fact that just yesterday, on May 8th, in Florida, which was just recently had to deal with their own issue last year with Parkland shooting, and they did a year-long comprehensive review, which I've talked about before, and their decision was that part of the way to protect kids until they can get the answer of how to stop this in general is to go out and they're going to arm teachers. And I know that's been a big issue across the nation. It was a big issue here in New York State about whether or not we should arm teachers. Will that make teachers police and so forth? And I think that's a really silly argument. The silly argument was, well, if we arm teachers, they become police. Well, the red flag legislation that was passed turns teachers into spies because the teachers have to evaluate each and every child every single day, and based on their actions, that child's actions, the teachers have to figure out whether or not there's a firearm in the home, and then they have to go, and they are mandated to go over to the courts to present a legal action against that family because the potential presence of a firearm and or danger to the community that doesn't need to be established in a court of law, and then have legal action taken against that family. That makes a teacher a spy for the government. Identify people who have firearms and then take them away. So the people who've argued, well, we don't want to turn teachers into police officers, you're turning them into spies if you pass a red flag legislation. You're not doing anyone a benefit. It's not resolving it. And more importantly, the bill doesn't arm every single teacher, the one in Florida. It arms those teachers who wish to be armed. And the governor, Ron DeSantis, signed the bill into law yesterday, May 8th, even as there was pressure from the anti-Second Amendment groups to veto a law that was passed by the state government. And we know, and this is all in reference to the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High or Parkland, Florida shooting, which killed 17 students. Now, the thing that's really important about that is it's not something that just came out of the air. Like in New York, the red flag legislation, which had been around since 2015, floating around, and no one would pass it because it was a really bad law. That just came out of nowhere, was pushed through in 6 months without any discussion. In fact, the lawmakers I spoke to, several of them who supported the bill either in part or in whole and voted for it, even though they knew and admitted, and I have published their discussion saying that they are flawed bills that have issues and problems and have legal consequences that are absolutely negative to the community and to individuals, even though they voted for it, then I have to say, in considering that, that came out of nowhere. That was passed out of nowhere. In Florida, we've seen that there was a study done that took an entire year, evaluated everything. The response time, how the response was reacted to, what are the potential benefits and detractions, and they evaluated that having armed resource officers in the school is a deterrent. Not only is it a deterrent, it is the fastest means of being able to stop an incident once it does occur. They're not presuming that getting rid of the guns is going to stop it. They're not presuming that having someone who is armed there is going to stop it, because it won't. What they're looking at is how do you mitigate the number of individuals who are wounded and killed if an incident starts. And having someone there sooner than later is one of the most critical things to save lives. The sooner you can have someone there with that second firearm, that good person trying to protect others, the sooner the incident stops and the fewer people who are injured. That is just the facts of it. And they determined in the Parkland, Florida study that there should be a number of school resource officers that are armed in the school based on the number of students in that school. In addition, and this is all from a study that was published in January of 2019. I've referenced it before. We will reference it again in the notes, in the links. But in addition to that, so Ron DeSantis has said that, for the schools that want, for the teachers that want to, that they are trained properly for this, they can go out and they can be armed to help in this protection of students. So let's understand, we don't have an answer to the first question, which is, what is making someone decide that the only answer in their lives is to go out and kill innocent people? That, I believe, is the question. And I mentioned it when I was talking over at Binghamton University. It's the number one thing. If we do not answer that, we cannot answer school shootings, mass shootings, any violence with guns. We can't answer that unless we answer that question. We cannot resolve this if we cannot answer that core, clear question. And it's not about the Second Amendment. It's not about whether someone thinks they'll be more or less free. It's not even about becoming Venezuela, which are all very important issues when dealing with the Second Amendment. But the reality is, we can't protect kids or our public and ourselves and our community if we can't answer that question. So in the meantime, until we get our politics right, until we get our nation right to be able to address that question, we have to protect ourselves. And one of the best ways to do that for our kids in schools is to go out and put armed resource officers and allow teachers who are trained and willing to do so to be able to be armed in those schools to protect them. That is the best answers we have. That is the reality. And that's why I believe Florida Governor DeSantis actually signed the bill, because it's of the options that are out there, it's the one that makes sense. Because you can tell me that we're going to have a red flag law or we're going to have a gun ban. And I'm going to tell you that a criminal person or someone who is deranged doesn't care. And they're going to find a way. They'll use a car. They'll use a box cutter. They'll use a sword, a hammer, a baseball bat. They'll make bombs. they will find the means to go out there. They don't need a firearm to do this. And we have seen over and over again that they don't need the firearm to do this. They will find other means, illegal and some legal, to find or weaponize other implements to carry out their warped, demented criminal actions, which I denounce completely. See, I'm really not focused on the politics here, and I'm really not focused on who did it. We can point to all kinds of crazy people. Some do it because of, again, some are doing it for their religious fanaticism. Some are doing it just because they're evil people. Some people are mentally ill. Doesn't matter if they're trans. Doesn't matter if they like Trump or hate Trump. It doesn't matter if they vote Democrat or Republican. It really doesn't matter. Those are trivialities that are meant to distract you from the fact that, one, we are not addressing the root problem, and two, to give someone else a political boost. And if we look at it purely from that sense, that's the problem. I support the Second Amendment, not because I am a conservative Republican. That is a secondary issue. I'm a conservative Republican, period. The Second Amendment isn't about my politics. It's about our rights, our ability to protect ourselves, to protect each other, both from the government and from crazy, deranged individuals that would like to have a mass shooting event. Because we can't answer why do they come to that conclusion that the only answer is to kill innocents. That's why I support the Second Amendment. That's the ultimate answer. Do I want to protect our nation from becoming Venezuela? Absolutely. But I also want to be able to protect myself, my friends, my family, my property from individuals who come to that conclusion, that somehow make the leap to think that the only answer is to kill innocents, which is always wrong. It is always wrong. It never will, whatever your underlying reason for doing that, let me say it very clearly, you will never get the resolution you want. It will never get you the answer. Killing innocents never answers anything. It won't. It never does. And it needs to be made very clear. I don't want to politicize any of these mass shootings, and I try not to. Yes, I am political, and yes, there is a political aspect to it, but the understanding is it will never, the reasoning is never for the politics. It's for the protection of each and every one of us, our communities, and that's what we need to get out there. Yes, I am upset with Democrats as they go and put out laws that take away from the Second Amendment because it prevents us from being able to defend ourselves while we avoid, sadly, in our politics, avoid trying to answer that underlying question. And that's what terrifies me. I don't know. Maybe that's just me. Maybe that's just the way I think about it. But, I want to commend Governor Ron DeSantis for being able to stand up in immense political pressure to pay attention to the actual research that was done on the Parkland shooting, to follow up on the recommendations of that, and to recognize that just taking away a gun does not protect anyone. And the only way to protect them in this environment at this time is to make sure that we have the resources available for those schools, for those students, to protect them. And that comes out of the Second Amendment. And he needs to be commended for that. He really does. And I want to also commend the students over at the STEM school. That's right, the Highlands Ranch High School. I want to commend them for standing up and saying, this shouldn't be political. This is about mental health. This is about how someone gets to that question. How do they get to the point where they're contemplating that the only answer is to kill innocents? And I commend them for that. I commend them for denouncing the media that makes this more all about the politics and not about the answer to the question or protection of those who need to be protected. I commend them about that. And I am sorry to hear about Kendrick Castillo having to give up his life because that's a sad thing, especially at 18 years of age. And God bless him that he was such a hero to save unknown numbers of lives by his sacrifice. And we should consider that strongly. We have to remember that impressively. But I'm going to take a quick break, and then I'll come back and I'll tell you about some of the other things that are going on that I think are equally just as interesting, and I think you're going to find it unique. But let's take a very different tone. We're going to go to a music break, and then we'll be right back. All right, everyone. Thank you for joining us back here at the No Soundbites Allowed podcast, which is found on the Exceptional Conservative Network. That's right, TECN TV. And I do invite you to listen to some of our other great hosts on the channel. Good friends of mine. That includes Ken McClinton, the founder of the Exceptional Conservative Network, and his Exceptional Conservative show. That is on evenings at 9 p.m. Also on Tuesdays and Fridays, there is Dr. Jane Ruby, who's on the program at 11 p.m. In the evening. Please do check her out. There's Randy Dunham. There are so many great people. The Lid, so many shows that are on. I do advise you to check it out. I'll definitely be posting, if I haven't already, I'll post the schedule so you'll be able to see all of the great shows that are on here. Do check them all out. I should also mention that coming up today, which is the 9th at 5:30 p.m., please do get involved with the Broome County Republican Women's Club. They have their event today, which will be a debate, a presentation meeting the candidates for the DA primary and other primaries throughout the region, and they'll be speaking at 7 p.m. But beforehand, there is a dinner. It's $20 to get you chicken and gravy, spare ribs, mashed potatoes, baked beans. It's a full meal, and you'll also be able to have a cash bar. Please let them know about this. Please be involved with that with the BCRWC, Broome County Republican Women's Group, as they present the candidates before the primary, which will be next month, so you get to know who can be your DA and why they should be. And there is a lot of news about that. Wow, that's been a big issue here in upstate New York, and I don't know that a lot of people know about it in other places. It's become a very nasty event, a very divided kind of race. Very little of it has to do with actual politics. It has to do with the individuals involved. More importantly, it has to do with other people who are involved. This is a case where we're seeing a ADA with 20 years, assistant district attorney with 21 years of experience, who is up against a challenger, a lawyer who is a defense attorney, has never been a prosecutor, who is they're both looking for the position that's going to be given up by Steve Cornwell, as Steve Cornwell, the current district attorney of Broome County, is looking to run for Congress, as softly announced in January. Now, here's the thing. In the district attorney's race in Broome County, the big thing is that everyone's talking about everything except what is really of interest and importance in this race. How is the district attorney's office going to function? What are the political beliefs what are the legal beliefs of the individuals? How are they going to prosecute the law? That's a big question. That is the question that should be asked about any district attorney's race. How are you going to run the district attorney's office? What crimes will be punishable? What cases will be moved forward? And how effective can anyone in that office be? We have one individual, Mike Korchak, who has 21 years of experience. We have another gentleman, Paul Battisti, with 0 experience on that. That is a big deal. But instead, we're seeing the races talking about the people who support Mr. Battisti and their issues and some of their failures that have become very public at this moment. And that's been taking up a lot of the energy of the race. Mr. Battisti's had several questions in his race. Where did he come up with $130,000 in 3 weeks for his campaign and to pay off the IRS? Why is he running when he has no experience? But my thing is, what do you plan to do if you become the district attorney? What does the current assistant district attorney, Mike Korchak, plan to do? Now, we did have an interview with assistant district attorney Mike Korchak, which I will link to in the notes here, and you'll be able to see it. We've gotten his answer. Mr. Battisti, who was offered the opportunity to come onto the show and talk with us about it, has yet to answer. He's indicated that he wants to, but won't actually set a time with us to do an interview. I don't know why. They're both Republicans, and I haven't heard from Mr. Battisti. There is a Democrat in the race who was from another region. She's recently been talking, but she's been laying pretty low key in this race as the Republicans are battling each other, which is a political tactic. Just, let your enemies fight amongst themselves. You'll come out stronger, and then you make your case against the winner, which is fine. That's normal politics. So I don't expect the Democrat to really be saying anything until after June, when she knows who's going to be her opponent. Although there are many questions to her about her beliefs in social justice. Is she a supporter of social justice? She was recently on the local news program, WNBF, and she really didn't address that. She danced around the question of what does she believe are enforceable and prosecutable cases. Does she believe in social justice? Would she enforce the laws as they exist, or would she interpret the laws based on her political beliefs? We don't have that answer yet. But that'll be something that should and must come up as we move forward. But that's not the political case I really want to address here. Yesterday I saw something really interesting. I go to my local city council meetings on a regular basis. And most people, God, there's usually 3 people in the room besides the city council for each of the meetings. They're not well received. They're not watched on very often. And I've talked about city council in the taping, but more importantly, yesterday was a very interesting one. And I hope people do pay attention to it and find out more about it. And I hope to have some of the city council members on to talk about this, because there's a question that in my local region, we have a development that's going on. They're trying to develop some property to get parking garages and to get mixed-use residential homes, 18 modified income homes. So they're supposed to be affordable. And there's $4 million that's being given by the state, taxpayer funds that are being allocated to this, $400,000 going to different places. So here's the thing. City council massively divided on this. This is an argument that's going on. And the reason why is we're seeing that taxpayer money is being applied to a project, and the project isn't ready to go forward. There's a problem right there. And this is where local people need to be involved, because I guarantee you, if this is happening in Binghamton, it's happening in other places, and I'll tell you about Utica in a second. But this is important because we need to understand what's happening in our local government. The news media were not, and they regularly are not, at the city council meetings. I actually go there as a citizen. I'm not there as a political commentator very often. I'm usually there just to observe and see what's going on in my community. And I try to get as many meetings as I can. I think I've been to over a third of them so far this year. But this is one of the biggest ones, where we're seeing city council saying, hey, here's my big problem. We have this project that isn't ready to go forward, that is already behind time, that is costing money. And the longer it takes, the more taxpayer money it's going to cost. And should we even move forward with it? There are questions that are not being answered about this that need to be answered. And we have a problem. And mind you, the city council right now is led by Republicans. Democrats are opposing it, but so are some of the Republicans, and they should. And this is not a political left versus right kind of issue. This is an issue of the efficiency of government. Is government efficiently using the taxpayer money, and will it in the future? Is this going to cost people more money in the long term than not? Can we get this done? The question is, we can build a parking lot, which we do need in my local community, in the downtown region, to help spark the economic stimulus to the area by giving it downtown parking. But the core of this project is the mixed-use modified income housing that is affordable, which is a major issue in this college town. And many college towns run into this issue. The communities become so focused and so dependent on a school that every other issue is kind of secondary. And they're looking, okay, they're going to put in a parking garage that will help to get more of the economy going, giving people places to park and therefore to go to the businesses in the region. But everything's dominated about the student housing. Meanwhile, and while that would be good, what about the people who have no place that they can afford to live? That is the real issue. If you have people who can afford to live downtown, they can walk to those businesses. If you have people who cannot afford those houses and they're not downtown, it doesn't matter if they walk or drive downtown, they can't afford it. They're spending their money on housing instead of going out and having a dinner downtown or buying clothes or non-essential items. They're not going to be downtown. They can't be. So this is definitely an issue that's not left or right. It's economics. It's pure economics. It's if we can't have people afford to live downtown, except for maybe the richest of the students, in a college town that depends on the students, you can't have a prosperous business. It's always going to be boom and bust, which we see, where we've hit this level where the student population has hit an equilibrium, that every business that opens, another one closes within 6 months because we can't support that. We have a local mall, the Oakdale Mall, that has essentially died. It's gone. There are no core businesses there. There's a few smaller mom and pop businesses, but the big chains, Sears, all of that, they're gone. And that's a problem. That's the problem. If we're not giving the local people, the people who are here 24/7 all throughout the year, if they can't afford to live here, then it doesn't matter whether or not you have parking spaces for them. They're not going to be there for those parking spaces. This is my point of view. This is the argument that was had in the city council, and it's interesting to see how this is moving forward. And these are the kind of issues where you are so vital to talk to your city council members, to find out what actually is going on, to be there and hear them having the discussion. That's the big thing. This is a big issue. And it's not left or right. Like I said, Republicans and Democrats are on both sides of this issue. Some are for it, some are against it. It's something we need to talk more about. And I hope to have one or two of the city council members on Saturday for the extended show to really get this, because there have been sporadic articles on this, but we need to have a very clear, singular discussion, and that should be on Saturday, and I hope to be able to have that so people will have a better understanding. There's also another issue that I wanted to bring up, which I think is kind of interesting, because in the city of Utica, and you can see this is on the Voss Political Commentary page, which is on Facebook, and we had an article I put out yesterday. There was a news announcement. There was a news announcement yesterday that we published, a press release, which we had received, that in Utica, there is the issue, and you've heard me talk about this before, that they're looking to have a downtown hospital in Utica. And a lot of people didn't get to, it didn't get a lot of attention because of the 2020 race for the New York 2018 race for the Congress, for the New York 22nd District. But it is an essential part of it. That eminent domain where we have seen the city of Utica, through agreements with Governor Cuomo, has guaranteed a hospital that was picked by a handful, roughly 5 leaders of government in the Oneida, Utica region, that made a decision that apparently is not in the best interest of the people. And it's still moving forward. And it's going to take away 34 businesses, 34 housing units, which are homes and businesses and nonprofits that are being kicked out to advance a political agenda that isn't in the best interest of most of the people. And a lot of people didn't see this press conference, which, by the way, if you did want to see it, It was televised. It was broadcast on Facebook Live, and you can see it here. Brett Truitt was one of the individuals who was at the event, and he taped it. As you can see, there aren't a whole lot of members of press that were there, which is sad that on such a major issue, an issue that's millions of dollars, that's going to affect every single person in the city of Utica, affect their ability to get health care, affect their economic well-being, so few actually were paying attention to it. And I advise people, you got to. When it comes to eminent domain, when it comes to the government using its full weight and power to advance a political agenda without the best interest of the public involved, that's a problem. And we've seen this issue, the Utica Hospital, being used to advance political careers, including that of Anthony Brindisi, as well as, you may say, Tony Picente, the county executive, and several others. So this is a problem. And again, just like in the case with the city council, which was for the city of Binghamton, we're seeing that not enough people are paying attention. And I say these two stories to bring up the thought. You are critical. Somewhere along the last, in my lifetime, in the last 51 years, maybe in the last 40 years, someone sold everyone the idea that you don't need to pay attention to what's going on in the local politics, that you don't need to be involved in what's happening, that all you need to do is read a headline and that's all. And as long as the headline comes from the big sites, the big companies, well, then you've gotten all the news you need. And you don't need to pay attention, and you don't need to vote, and you don't need to be involved in the local politics. And that's wrong. Somewhere along the line, people became convinced that as soon as someone is elected into office, well, that person's IQ jumps up and they become a genius, and that they know everything that they're talking about. And I can tell you, in my personal experience of knowing elected officials for over 12 years and doing interviews with them and speaking with them directly, in more contact than the average person usually gets, sadly, they aren't. They aren't smarter. They aren't better. They're just as smart as they were the day before they got elected. And in many cases, that's not a good thing because they weren't that smart to start off with. And they make bad decisions. And they make decisions based on politics, not necessarily the best interest of the public. And because the public doesn't know anything, they get away with it. And I disagree with that. It doesn't matter if you're on the right, the left, you're a conservative, libertarian, I don't care. If you're not involved, politicians make decisions that aren't necessarily the best decision for you, and they get away with it because the news media has already picked which way they want to go with the story. Whether it's the eminent domain issue with the downtown hospital in Utica, whether it's a parking garage down in Binghamton, we're seeing decisions being made that aren't necessarily in the best interest of the public, and the public should know because you have the final word on this. Your vote matters. Your voice matters. And most importantly, on these local issues, you make a difference in the presidential race. Yes, you do. Don't be thrown off by all the talk about, excuse me. Don't be thrown off about all the talk about the Electoral College and that your vote doesn't matter. Yes, it does. It still makes a difference. And yes, it's important because without it, then you don't count. If they get rid of the Electoral College, yes, 95% of this nation will not matter. But if you have the Electoral College, it will. But more importantly, on the local level, it is absolutely essential that you have a voice. And I love it. The only time I see people coming out to a lot of these events is when some political organization, like Political Leaders of Tomorrow, Citizen Action, it's almost always the far left that I've noticed this with, that they'll fill a room to make one argument that they like, one political agenda, ideology that they want to get attention on. News media will flock to it, and you'll see a room full of people that, and I saw this in my local city council, there has been one event, one discussion where we had, 24 people show up, and they were all there for just one thing, to make one complaint, and they all left. And they haven't been back. They haven't been back because they don't care. It's not about the community. You want to improve your community. You want to make it safer. You want to make it richer, you want to make it more comfortable, you want to have better education, get involved. Pay attention to these issues. I'm going to try and have the local politicians on, the local people involved, the regular people involved who are involved in these issues, both in Utica and here in Binghamton, to talk about this a little bit more, as well as the other national issues, because they're important as well. But I want to have them around so that we can talk a little bit more about that and the importance of you, how you make the difference. Because I don't think that's addressed enough. You make the difference if you are for or against the eminent domain and the government using its full force and power without having a clear understanding of whether it's a benefit to the actual public for the Utica Hospital. You know what? You make the difference on that. You're the final deciding vote on that, not the politicians involved. If you think that a parking garage is important, more important than having the housing that would allow individuals to be able to walk around and be involved and having affordable housing, if you think that's, then you need to come out. You need to make that argument. Or if you're against it, you need to make that known, because you make the difference. The politicians are there for your voice. If you're not talking about it, I guarantee you, your best interest is not going to be served. That's true whether we're talking about the Second Amendment, it's true about the First Amendment, it's true about every aspect. And I cannot emphasize that enough. But I hope that you have enjoyed this episode of No Soundbites Allowed here on the Exceptional Conservative Network. And I hope that you may take a look at some of the other things that we've done. I'll have links so you can check out some of our latest podcasts to see some of the ones we've done in the past. Please subscribe. And most of all, do check us out. We're here every Tuesday, every Thursday at 1 p.m. We're here on Saturdays starting at 12 noon until 2 p.m. It's a 2-hour show. And we try to have guests on as often as possible, talking about all the issues that affect you, either at the national level, the state, or the local, to let you know what's going on, to let you be involved so that you can make your choice, whether it's conservative, Republican, libertarian, even if it's a Democrat or a progressive. The more knowledge you have, the better we all are. So with that, I want to thank you for being here on the show, and I look forward to hearing your comments, your thoughts, and let's talk again. I'll see you on Saturday at 12 noon. Until then, I hope everyone will be well. Thank you.